mí. Ellos siempre van a hablar de mí. A ellos no les gustan sus vidas y se le hacen largos sus días. Yo vine aquí con equipo bien preparado, más tight que los pantalones pegados. You know you wish you was legal, but you can't. Esto se cogió tiempo, como una cocinera la preparé desde la madrugada, esperando mi entrada. Oye, no te pongas, que yo no soy monga y me pongo a bregar como un mosquito. No me puedes matar ni un poquito, porque yo doy salsa y pico, como hacen allá en Puerto Rico.
How you guys doing? My name is Josie Carr. I'm an electronic musician, producer, and NYU educator for electronic music production and music software. Today I'll be talking about how to control the scenes and the sections in the music software and plug in using an external controller. Let's get to it. So here we are. I have the Maschine software opened up, the standalone version of it. I've loaded up one of the projects that comes with one of the expansion packs. In this case, I'm using Ode to Shaolin, which is part of the True School expansion pack. It has, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scenes, and we're going to trigger them with an external keyboard. So the first thing that we want to do is go into the Maschine preferences. We can go the long way by using Maschine to appear. I'm going to use the shortcut Command, comma. It's going to open up the preferences, and I want to go to the MIDI section. And the first thing I want to do, obviously, like we all do, right? We want to make sure that our USB cable is connected to our controller and is connected to our computer. In my case, I'm using an Axiom, which I'll show you guys in a minute, to control it, and you guys will see it here. Axiom is checked and it's receiving input from that controller. I have a few others that I'm not using, but for today's example, I'm going to be using the Axiom 49 keyboard, and I made sure that it's checked. Once that is done, I can close out of there, and I'm all pretty good, right? And the next thing that we want to do is we want to set up the scenes, right? Because we are in the scenes to be able to be controlled by the Axiom. So in that case, we're going to go into Edit right here. We're going to go into MIDI change. And we can see there that we can actually control 3 different things. We can control the scene, the section, and the lock. The lock is pretty cool. I'm going to do a separate video for that. And that pretty much is you can kind of, I have a video actually. You guys can check it on my channel, which I show you guys how to do lock scenes. Basically, I can mute stuff, unmute stuff, and kind of then trigger them so I can have a sort of song arrangement that can also be triggered by an external keyboard. Okay. In this case, we're working on scenes, so I'm just going to turn on the scenes here, and I have 2 options. I can do MIDI note or program change. In this case, I want to use MIDI note, not program change. By the way, program change only works in the standalone version. It doesn't work when you're using it as a plugin. So I'm just going to go to MIDI note right here, and my source is going to be my keyboard, my Axiom 49, which I'll show you guys. Now it has a channel. The channel is important, right? Because in most cases, when you buy a keyboard, the default channel is channel 1, which means that it's going to trigger your software, or it's going to receive input through MIDI channel 1. Okay, so in my case, I left it at MIDI channel 1. That's fine. But in case you do not know that, it's good to go into your, manual, whatever you're using, and find out what MIDI channel your keyboard is transmitting MIDI information on. Okay, so I've set it up to that, and now I can close that out. Now, right now, as you guys can see, I do have my Maschine software, so I can control. I can switch between the scenes very easily up here. But let's say I don't want to do that, or I don't have the Maschine controller. Great. So here we are, my keyboard, and I'm going to switch my camera now to the keyboard so you guys can actually see that. 1 second. Fantastic. So here I have my controller that I'll be using. It is a multi-channel controller. Basically means that I can use more than 1 MIDI channel to control different things in my software. In this case, the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring my octave down 3 octaves, because the way that the Maschine software is set up, it is set up to kind of trigger the scenes and the sections starting at negative C, I think it's C1 or C2. So that's why we have to bring the octave down. So in your case, I would suggest, keep bringing that octave down until you're actually able to trigger it. And what I mean by that is, watch, when I hit the C, I am changing the scenes. I'm going to my intro, my verse, second verse, the breakdown, and so forth. So now if I were to play it, and I'll play it here. As you guys can see, I'm changing the scenes with my controller, which is great. Now, let's talk a little bit about what else happens, right? Because when I'm changing it, it's kind of it's keeping it musical, and I'm able to switch without it sounding really, bad, right? The reason for that is up here in the main transport area. If we click on it, you can see that I am changing the scenes every 16th note, okay, which is pretty cool. So if you have pretty good timing, you can, use 16th. If you don't, you might want to do 1 bar. So it waits 1 bar before it switches to the next scene when you trigger it. Or you can do it by scene, which means it will wait for the scene to finish out and then go to the next one, right? So or we could turn it off. So for example, if I hit scene and I were to hit play, it's hitting that one. We'll go to the next one. When that one is over, it will then play the next one. Okay? It's gonna wait and it should switch now. Which is a good way, like if you're learning timing and stuff like that, to kind of practice and, get better. Or maybe that's the way you want to perform. We all have different styles and different ways of working. So that's a fantastic way to do that. Now we can also say, let's re-trigger it, which means that, right, you saw when I switched parts, it was caching up and it was keeping it musical. Okay, re-trigger means that it doesn't matter where it is. As soon as I hit it, it's just going to start playing it. So for that case, I'm going to do the 16th note one, because otherwise it would be kind of weird. Okay, so let's hit play there. See that? As soon as I hit it, it's going to start from the very beginning of the next scene. That's what retrigger simply means. Retrigger means that when you hit it, it's going to start from the very beginning when you hit the next scene. Okay. Another thing we can do is say, hey, why don't we just turn it completely off, right? And now we can hit play. And it allows you to be more creative performing. But that obviously takes a lot of time with timing and things like that. I'm not the best at the timing situation, but there are some really awesome people that can do that. So I recommend just checking them out. Okay. So there you have it, guys. That is changing the scenes using an external controller. Now, the next thing that we can also do, right, and I'll go back here and I'll go back to the edit and go to MIDI change, right, and I'm going to turn it off for the scenes and I'm going to set it up for the sections. Same deal, MIDI channel 1, I'm using the Axiom here, okay, and now instead of it controlling the scenes, it will control the sections of my song. So as soon as I hit it, you'll see that it switches right to the song section. So right now, and this also applies, I have it off, remember, and I have it set to re-trigger, so we'll start right from the very beginning. So I'll hit play. See that? So it does the same thing. It allows me to change the sections of the song. And, I really like the idea of, being able to use it, because if you think outside the box when you're doing performances, right, and maybe you're using, and let's say in the case that you did have a machine controller, you can use the best of both worlds, right? You can say, I'm going to use the machine controller maybe to play some drum pads or maybe as a mixer, and then use my keyboard to kind of trigger scenes and do crazy stuff like that, right? And saying that, I'll give you a way that you can do that, right? I'll give you a tip. You can go to MIDI change, right? And set up, let's say, for example, this one will be on MIDI channel 2. Remember I said my controller was a multi-channel controller, right? And then I'll set up scene 1 to MIDI note, and I'll make that MIDI channel 1 will trigger the scenes, and MIDI channel 2 will trigger the sections. So if I were performing, again, I have a controller, a machine controller, I can use my keyboard. But if I did have a controller, I can use the best of both worlds again. It doesn't have to be just one controller, right? So here we are. I'm playing this. Right? I'm experimenting. I'm playing around. I'm trying different ideas. And now I want to go into my song. I'm going to go to MIDI channel 2 and get right into my song that I've already arranged. So it's a cool way to perform. Again, I hope that has helped, guys, and I'm trying to keep the video shorter, so sometimes I'm cramming everything up into one. If that's something you don't like, let me know, and I'll take my time and make them a little bit longer. But for now, that is the way that we can control scenes and sections with an external controller. I hope you've enjoyed that, and as I do always, let me give you a quick how-to. First thing we want to do is make sure that our keyboard, external keyboard or controller, it doesn't have to be a keyboard, it could be any type of controller, is hooked up to our computer. And first thing we want to do is check that in the preferences. Okay, we want to go into the MIDI section right here. Make sure that in the input section they're checked. Make sure that you know what MIDI channel your controllers are outputting information from. The next thing we want to do is go into the edit section, go to MIDI change, and on MIDI change, if we want to control the scenes and the sections, we decide. We set it to MIDI node or program change. In my case, I use MIDI node. I set up my axiom. We set up the channel that, again, we know it's sending information from. In my case, I have a multi-channel controller, so I'm able to do more than one thing. I'm setting up my scene on part 1 to MIDI channel 1 and on the other one on part 2, and I can close that out. Now, when I hit my controller, I can change. Remember, MIDI channel 2 was my song sections, and if I go to MIDI channel 1 here, which is part 1 of my controller, it'll change my scenes. Okay, but lastly, I forgot to say, which is very important, make sure that you transpose your keyboard down -3 octaves, because that's the way that Native Instruments has placed them to be triggered. I think it's -C1 or -C2. I hope that has helped. I'll see you guys soon, and this will be a 2-part video. The next one will be on how to do it with the plugin version. Okay, see you then. Ciao for now.
No importa lo que digan de mí, ellos siempre van a hablar de mí. A ellos no les gustan sus vidas y se les hacen largos sus días. Yo vine aquí con equipo bien preparado, más tight que los pantalones pegados. You know you wish you was ligado, but you can't. Esto se cogió tiempo, como una cocinera la preparé desde la madrugada, esperando mi entrada. Oye, no te pongas, que yo no soy monga y me pongo brega.